all of you this evening. Not feeling the greatest tonight, and so I'm going to talk to you maybe a little more than preach to you tonight, and maybe we can still hopefully gain some insight and some benefit from some context of Scripture together this evening. If you are astute and remember bulletins very well, you might remember that that's the exact same text that I had read last Sunday night. And there's a reason for that, because last Sunday night, the first 5 verses introduced what I wanted to talk about last Sunday. The last 2 verses in that text this evening introduce what I want to talk about this evening. But before I get into that text for a moment, let me set maybe why it is I want to talk about the things that I want to talk about tonight. It was several years ago in a sermon, not here, so just erase that from your mind. That way you can concentrate on the thought rather than figuring out who it was. But I preached a sermon and I made this comment. There's a song we sometimes sing, and song leaders sing it. I'm not offended by it. But we sing a song, I'm satisfied with just a cottage below, a little silver, and a little gold. And I made the comment that I have some difficulty singing that line because I didn't believe I lived in a cottage, and I didn't believe I just had just a minuscule amount of silver and gold. I felt that I'm very blessed by the Lord. I felt that the Lord has been very kind and very generous, and in many ways my life had abounded in lots of ways, and I felt very blessed, and almost felt like that was not necessarily as accurate as it could be. Now I understand the symbolism of it, I understand what the message of it is, I get all that. So sing it, it's okay, no, that's not my point. My point is, I think sometimes we believe that though, that we're not as blessed as we really are. I'm afraid that sometimes we become convinced that we're really not blessed and we really do live in a cottage. In fact, after I preached that sermon, made that very statement that I just made a few moments ago, one of the members came to me and said, "Brian, you do live in a cottage." She said, "Your house would be considered a cottage in many neighborhoods across the country. Your house would be considered a cottage in a lot of places that you might go and visit." And I thought to myself, well, I'll be honest with you. The first thought I had, I thought, I wonder what the elders would think if I went and told them that the church is making me live in a cottage. That's the first thing maybe that I thought about. But I got to thinking more about that. That her mindset was that and I gave part of that. I didn't mean to even give 50% of that away. But the mindset that person had was maybe I really wasn't living in abundance. Maybe I really didn't have all the blessings that I thought I had. And maybe I wasn't as well off and cared for as well as I thought I was. And then I thought about that for a minute, and I thought, no, that's not right. I am very blessed. I believe she was inaccurate to say that. I wasn't living in a cottage. Yeah, okay, if you want to compare the house I was living to what others may live in, sure, it may not have the same square footage as others have. It may not have all the amenities that some houses have, and it may not have had all the aesthetics, and it may not have had some kind of Victorian architecture to it or some grand thing about it that made it special, but we were still very blessed to have a warm place to live, adequately taking care of my family, and it wasn't really a cottage. My point, friends, from all that is simply this, that sometimes we have a misconception of what abundance is. And this time of year, as we lead into Thanksgiving week, as we're in Thanksgiving week, and I would hope that in all the hustle and bustle, and again, we've all got opinions about things. We've all got opinions about Black Friday sales, and we've got all kinds of opinions about whether it's ridiculous that stores are opening at 5 on Thanksgiving now. Black Friday used to be a Friday morning now. It might as well call it Black Thursday, because the truth is it's starting at 5 in the afternoon in most places on Thanksgiving Day, and I'm not concerned necessarily about those things. Make your own judgments about it. But if it removes the concept of being thankful, that's what I'm concerned about. If people can't pause and consider how grateful and thankful they are for the blessings that they've been bestowed upon them, then we kind of miss the point of the week, and we've kind of missed the point of life in relationship to what God has done for us. I want you to notice in that text, at the end of that text, in 1 John chapter 3, in verses 7 and 8. 1 John chapter 3, verses 7 and 8. He said, little children, let no one deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous, just as he is righteous. But he who sins is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifest, that he might destroy the works of the devil. It's righteousness. The question maybe at hand tonight is that which one would I choose? If righteousness and abundance are laid before me, if the decision that is laid before me is would I choose the righteousness of God over the abundance of life, which side of that equation would I find myself on? Am I willing to be deceitful? Am I willing to be dishonest? Am I willing to abandon righteous behavior in order to improve my physical situation in life? When led to a moment where I must choose between the two, what would I decide? Let me share with you a quote, and I'm going to come down here so everybody can read it for a minute. I know I block the view sometimes from up there. Sorry, cameraman. I'll be back in a minute. But here was a quote from a fella after and this has been a several years ago election. He said, "It's clear that on conservative moral values, people voted for those values over their own economic interests. I don't understand it. And I think we need to go back and look at it." I want you to think about what that man just said. He said people chose morals over their wallets, and he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand how it's possible that anyone would choose their moral fiber and righteousness over making their wallets fatter. He couldn't grasp that concept. And I feel sorry for a guy like that, to be honest with you. I feel sorry for a man who has determined in his mind that all things are underneath the priority of abundance. In his mind, all things should come secondary to abundance and wealth and economic improvement. And if it means sacrificing righteousness, so be it, because my economic condition is the most important thing in life. And shame on him and shame on us if that's our mindset. If we are so convinced that morals are secondary to economic standing, then we have missed what God is doing for us. And we have missed the righteousness of God. So what's the Bible say about this? Well, let's talk about a couple things. Proverb 25, verse 26. Proverb 25, verse 26 makes this statement. And it's a fair warning, by the way, because notice how he labels him in the first part of the verse. He says, "A righteous man who falters before the wicked is like a murky spring and a polluted well." And God challenges the righteous man to not give way to wicked thinking. And there may be those who come around sometimes, and they may give us easy paths in their mindset. They give us easy paths to improve our economic state, but it may require me to be a little shady about that. It may require me to abandon righteous behavior in order to receive the economic benefit. It may require me to abandon my very moral standard in which to make sure that I improve my economic circumstance. A business deal here or there. We call it in the big modern world, in the banking and in the stock markets, the insider trading, where somebody knows something is going to happen in the future, and so he's buying or selling stocks ahead of the fall. He has prior knowledge, and that's illegal, number one, and it's immoral. But they don't care. It doesn't matter to that man because his economic improvement's the most important thing to him. And so maybe it's not the stock market for us. I don't know that very many of us are all that well invested into the stock market. Maybe you are, and that's great, not wonderful for you. But I would hope that we would never be deceitful. I would hope that we would never try and attempt dishonest measures. I would hope that righteousness in my life would stand and that I would never want it polluted. I would never want my righteousness polluted because of a dishonest deal, an unfair act, a taking advantage. I think you heard me talk a little while back about, I think it was in a Bible class, I mentioned to you one time when the laundromat down here was spitting out 5 quarters for $1. and the line was out the door of people making change. And they never thought that there was any victim in that. It's almost as if the machine was putting those quarters in there itself. I wonder sometimes. I was looked at like the funny Jeremy Joy and I, and Roger Smith was with me. We were down in Charleston, West Virginia one time in the mall down there during the basketball tournament. And the three of us, well, I think it was Jeremy, and so he had the greater righteous moral standard than this. But he found a $20 bill on the floor of the mall. We walked up to a police officer in the mall and said, we found this $20 bill on the floor. It didn't belong to any of us, and we felt wrong just sticking that in our pocket. Now, I guarantee you that officer looked at us like we were the three craziest men ever to walk before him. Because I guarantee you that there have been many a dollar bill, a $10 bill, a $20 bill, a $50 bill dropped on the floor of the mall, and there ain't been anybody ever try to turn it in. But honesty demanded that we try something to try to find the rightful owner. Now, he was right in his conclusion. He said, exactly, how do you expect me to find the rightful owner of that? Do you want me to make an announcement over the PA that a $20 bill was found and come and claim it? You'll cause a riot. Sometimes you just try to do the right thing. I'd rather have my righteousness intact. That's the point. I would rather not murky my righteousness. I would rather feel good and honest about things than to do anything outside the lines, even in what might seem silly and minor issues. That may not have been the same path you would have chosen, but I'm just trying to illustrate it for you. Too many of us sacrifice our righteous moral standard before God for $1, to take advantage of a moment to gain financial benefit, and I would hope that none of us would ever be guilty of that. Sorry, I picked the wrong color for the secondary. They'll just disappear on you tonight. And so we should have a desire to overcome the evil. We should have a desire, back to our text, to overcome evil. Not give in to it, not say, well, that's just the way the world is, not say, well, that's just the way men are, that's the way the game's played. We rationalize our righteousness away all the time. We say things like that to ourselves, well, Brian, you just don't live in the real world. To be honest with you, sometimes I'm not so sure I want to live in the real world. But notice he said, evil creates greater challenge. He who sins is of the devil. I don't want to be described that way, verse 8. For the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifested, he might destroy the works of the devil. The purpose of Jesus coming partly was to destroy the works of the devil, to give me the opportunity to avoid sin, to avoid issues where I've abandoned my moral standard. And so let's not let abundance take over. And let's be very careful that we don't give way for economic benefit. Because at the end of the day, I'd much rather have my righteous character than the wealth of all the world. At the end of the day, the Lord is not going to ask me. Someday I'll stand before Him, and He's not going to ask me what kind of bank account I had. He's not going to ask me what kind of wealth I accumulated. He doesn't care what kind of car I drove or what house I lived in. What He cares about is whether or not I conducted my life in a righteous manner. What He's going to ask me is whether or not I followed His standard and did I live according to His will and His purposes for me. And so it's not worth sacrificing righteousness to gain some sort of financial benefit. Romans 2, verse 13, for not the hearers of the law are just in the sight of God, but the doers of the law will be justified. In the sight of God, what I'm really looking for is justification. I can't help but wonder someday whether folks are going to stand before God and maybe they're going to try to, well, Lord, how can I be wrong? Look at all the great things that I was able to accomplish. Look at all the blessings that I was able to accumulate. Look at all the abundance that surrounds me. Surely there's some good somewhere. And the answer in response, when you add what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7 as well, is that righteousness is what I was asking for. Faithful dedication. Justification comes by doing my will, not because you were rich, not because you gained great wealth, And from a nation standpoint, Proverbs 14, verse 34, we remember the verse. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. I think it's fair for us to acknowledge that God wants us to get this point on both levels. He wants us to get it on a personal level, that my personal righteousness is not worth sacrificing in order to gain greater abundance, but He also wants a nation. He also wants a people. He also wants a nation to be able to recognize that righteousness is what really exalts them. And sin has always been a reproach. I can't help but think how embarrassed God is of the claims made before Him. At noon on Thanksgiving Day, people gather together and thank Him for the bounty of life and for the table that is before them, and then go and talk ugly and ram each other with shopping carts and speak ill of each other 5 hours later. Doesn't make any sense, does it? What kind of nation is that? What kind of nation is it that in one breath can try to say, well, thank you for what you've given me, and then curse their fellow man not 5 hours later? You remember the scene? This whole thing, this is the point I felt like it turned. Do you remember the Cabbage Patch Dolls? To me, that is when all this turned. I could be historically wrong on that, but if I'm right, if you go back historically, I think you'll find it was the first time in my memory anyway that I can remember watching people get in a fist fight over a holiday gift, and that was supply and demand issues. That wasn't even Black Friday, that was supply and demand. There weren't enough of them for everybody that wanted them. And people turned vicious. Now I want you to think about that. Turned vicious in order to get one, and then going to hand that to their child as a gift. Look what Daddy got you. He had to beat 3 guys up and 2 old ladies. Right? What kind of nation is that? What kind of nation is that? I don't know that that's what our founding fathers had in mind. I don't know that's the kind of place that we should be building. Righteousness exalts a nation all the time. And just because there's a sale, or just because you could save a few dollars, or just because you could make a few dollars, or just because you have a way to be able to maybe circumvent the system and kind of figure out a path that's a little easier. Is abandoning my righteousness worth it? Is that gift worth it? To act in ways that are absolutely contrary to what God's children should be. And so my encouragement would be, if you are a Black Friday shopper and you like to get out amongst all of it, then how about spread some kindness while you're there? And rather than try to race the guy to make sure that you're the 10th out of 10 who gets it, maybe say, you go ahead. Wouldn't that just shock the world? Right? Maybe that's what we need, is we need the world to see more righteous behavior from people who ought to be righteous, who ought to be behaving themselves in better ways. I told you I've got a cold. I'm just talking. Here's a thought I want us to consider as well. I think sometimes we're convinced that there's satisfaction at the end of this process. And it's not always the case, by the way. Ecclesiastes writer who pursued life in every way imaginable. And if we're accurate in saying that the book of Ecclesiastes was written by King Solomon, you can even multiply that by tenfold of the manner in which the writer of this book lived his life. And if it's not him, he says upon himself that he lived in every way. He pursued everything. Anything that he thought would make him happy, he went after it. But notice what he says. He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This also is empty or vanity. If our goal and purposes in life are always surrounded by dollars, silver, and the pursuit of abundance, he says you'll never be satisfied. It'll never end. It's an insatiable approach because there's always more silver to be gotten. There's always more abundance to be had. There's always a bigger barn to be built, right? Isn't that what Jesus illustrated in the New Testament when He said, here was a man who had such abundance that he said, I know what I'll do. Certainly wouldn't want to share it, right? I certainly wouldn't want to share it. I certainly wouldn't want to help others with it. I'm going to build a bigger barn so that I can store it all, and that way I can sit back and take my ease and say, what a great life that I have. The only problem was, what did Jesus say? He said, thou fool, tonight your life's over. And that big barn full of goods that you could have bestowed yourself for the benefit of others and to help others will become the property of others anyway. Be careful. We are programmed. Advertising attempts to program us to seek abundance. Be careful. Have you all seen this? If you shop electronics, and you know me, I'm a geek. I love electronics. I admit that. And been in for a long time. But I would pray that I would never get this way. Have you seen the Amazon Fire ad? And what it is, and here's why I say it, is because they've lowered the price. They've made a new Amazon Fire tablet, and it's only $49.99. It is so cheap, go buy 8 of them. That's the ad. They show a woman with a selfie stick, and it's got 7 of them on the selfie stick so that she can see herself from 7 different angles because $50 is so cheap anyway, go buy 7 of them. You want a tablet everywhere you turn in your house? Go buy dozens of them because they're only $50. Now, number one, that's kind of insulting to people who where $50 may feed them for quite a while. And number two, the greater problem in some senses is that it promotes the idea that abundance is the best approach to everything. One tablet surely won't be enough, right? One will never satisfy. That's the imagery. You'll never be happy. Your tree will not look right if it just has 1 Amazon Fire under it. It needs 7 under it, right? That's the imagery. That's the message. Here's the scary part. It's going to work. There are going to be folks who will go buy multiples because they'll say to themselves, it's only $50, and who shouldn't have 6 or 7 Amazon Fires sitting there at their beck and call at any moment. Now, some of you don't even know what I'm talking about. An Amazon Fire tablet isn't some kind of new hot sauce. It's a computerized tablet. It's a screen. This isn't an Amazon Fire, by the way. Go buy one if you want it. But avoid that mindset of abundance. I have to have more, more, more. And this time of year, it's amazing, isn't it? Time of year we're supposed to be thankful and grateful and generous and kind and giving and loving. And yet we're fed every day through advertisement. No, it's about you, it's about you, it's about it's about what you want, it's about building up bigger barns and bigger barns. Don't buy into it, friend. Choose righteousness over abundance. Don't pursue it. Because there's all kinds of deceitful traps laid along the way that you don't catch. Now back at chapter 2, verse 5. Indeed, because he transgresses by wine, he is a proud man. And he does not stay at home because he enlarges his desire as hell. And he is like death and cannot be satisfied. He gathers to himself all nations and heaps up for himself all peoples. I want you to think about that for just a half a second here. He is like death and cannot be satisfied. It's an interesting parallel, isn't it? Have you ever thought about, well, you've had moments in life probably, right, where it seems like, well, the old timers say this when it comes to folks passing away. You say it comes in what? It comes in threes, right? They always say that. Makes everybody nervous after the second one, by the way. I'm not so sure. But I want you to notice that's what he said. Death never satisfied, right? Death just seems to keep coming sometimes. It's never satisfied. And so he parallels, he says this man who he becomes intoxicated through the process. And he won't stay home, and he's always out there enlarging his desires, and he says he's like death. He'll never be satisfied. 3 won't be enough. 4, 5, it'll just keep going. He gathers to himself all nations, and he heaps up for himself all peoples. He lays traps for others in the process. He will not all these take up a proverb against him, and a taunting riddle against him, and say, woe to him who increases what is not his? Who's increasing by taking advantage of others? Woe to him who increases what is not his. How long? And to him who loads himself with many pledges. Will not your creditors rise up suddenly? Will they not awaken who oppress you? And you will become their booty. Can I offer you a suggestion as we come into this time of year? From this biblical text, credit is debt. Credit is debt. Just don't forget that. That God wants us to be very careful. Now, I didn't say you can't have a loan. I didn't say you couldn't have a credit card, right? I'd be lying to you, right? You could pull that right there and you could see a credit card inside that wallet. That's not what I said. What I said, when we use that, remember it's debt. And so notice what he said. He said, woe to him who increases what is not his. How long we continue to, and to him who loads himself with many pledges, many promises. When you lay that credit card down at Walmart, what are you saying to him? I promise the credit card company, right? Not Walmart. Walmart's getting theirs, right? Walmart's going to get theirs from the credit card company. You lay the credit card down, you're making a promise to Visa, to Discover, to American Express, whoever it is. You're making a pledge to them. I'm good for this. I'm going to make this right. I'm going to pay this. And he said, be careful because there's a deceitful trap in this process. And he says we can get so enamored by free money. But he says the problem is, at some point, notice verse 7, will not your creditors rise up suddenly? Will they not awaken who oppress you? And you will become their booty. Do not let the pursuit of abundance and wanting to keep up with what everybody else has drive you into poor financial choices that are not righteous to make, by the way. And I'm not standing here trying to say that we should bring in financial consultants into our pulpits. What I'm saying is, let's at least use the text the Bible gives us that talks about the subject matter. And the warning that is given here in Habakkuk, be careful. Be careful. Because what happens sometimes is our righteousness sometimes is abandoned because we get ourselves in such straits and difficulties that now I almost feel compelled that I've got to do unrighteous things to repay this circumstance. Be careful. Wealth and abundance and the seeking of it are a deceitful trap. You know, it might be nice to have 6 or 7 Amazon Fire tablets sitting around, but you know what else you're going to want once you get those? You're going to want 5, 6, or 7 covers for them. And then you're going to want multiple covers because you know that you can't use the same cover for very long. You would look silly if you had the same cover on your phone or on your tablet more than 3 or 4 weeks. What would others think of me if I haven't changed my iPhone cover in a month? I hope I didn't touch a nerve. I saw some parents going, But that's what abundance does, right? It's what it does. One's not enough. I got to have 2. Once I've got 2, I got to have 3. Once I got 3, I got to have 4. Learn some satisfaction at some point. That's the point. Learn some satisfaction at some point. Because what happens is we keep pursuing the abundance, we keep pursuing the wealth, and all of a sudden now, it's no longer just the idea of having something that would benefit or promote the wellness of my life, but now it's a matter of being wasteful. Isaiah 55 and verse 2. Why do you spend money for what is not bread? Why do you spend money on that which doesn't really help you in any way? That's what the point of that is. Why do you spend money for that which is not bread, and your wages for what does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and let your soul delight itself in abundance. Can I illustrate that to you? Get yourself a single black case for your phone and be satisfied. Why? Because if I'm continually consumed with wanting the next one and the next one and the next one, and if you're having yard sales and you're selling 8 or 9 phone cases that you collected that year, wasteful or not, you decide. Right? Wait, you decide. I'm just asking. Remember, I'm fevered. I'm just asking. Well, I'm not really. But wasteful sometimes. There's caution in the Scriptures. Paul said in Philippians chapter 4, verse 11. Philippians chapter 4, verse 11. Paul said, in whatever state or condition I found myself, I figured out how to be satisfied in it. I appreciated that about the Apostle Paul. And he educates me to try to do the same thing. Not that I speak, he says, in regard to need. For I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You know what I appreciate about what Paul says there, by the way, in verse 13? And sometimes we kind of take that thought and extract it and don't necessarily look at it in light of what he just said. What he said was, I need the strength of Jesus whether I'm abounding or I'm abased. I need the strength of Jesus whether things are good or whether things are bad. Whether I have a lot of things around or I don't have very much at all. Whatever state or condition I find myself, I need Jesus to strengthen me to handle that moment in the right way. If I don't have a lot in the moment, Jesus, give me the strength to not abandon righteousness to improve my economic circumstance. Jesus, give me strength to not abandon moral standard in order that I could help myself financially. Jesus, give me the strength. I'm struggling right now. I'm challenged right now. But give me the strength not to give in. Maybe I'm abounding right now. Maybe good things are happening. Maybe I'm very blessed. Jesus, give me the strength to not be wasteful. Jesus, give me the strength to not be succumbed to the idea of abundance where I feel like I always have to have, and have some more. Jesus, give me the strength that just because I can afford 6 Amazon Fire tablets doesn't mean I need 6 Amazon Fire tablets. Jesus, give me the strength to know how to handle either side of this. And give me the strength of righteousness and moral standard to live according to your righteousness no matter what. Proverb 30 and verse 8 simply says, give me neither poverty nor riches. Lord, just let me be somewhere in the middle, because each of those extremes have their own set of challenges. Now, I know that maybe in my efforts to show and illustrate points tonight, you might thought I was a bit exaggerative. Sometimes you have to make extreme thoughts in order to understand the simpler thought. And I might also add that I know that my children are now concerned because their mother has been watching at home everything I just said. And they're all thinking to themselves right now, we ain't getting nothing this year. I may make that happen yet. That's not what I said. But if I lead them to the idea that abundance is what's more important than righteousness, then I've failed them. And that if I let the blessings of life overwhelm us to the point where they begin to take for granted the blessings that God has given our family, then I've failed them. Parents, we all want to do good things for our children. That's just fact. Grandparents are just as bad towards their grandchildren. We're very blessed. And so do kind things for those you love. The lesson was not entitled, Don't Ever Buy Anybody Anything. The lesson was, make sure righteousness is first. And recognize that a pursuit of abundance will overshadow righteousness sometimes. And God says, never do that. Never do that. Never let abundance overshadow righteousness. Because we can begin to teach, even in a kind of an unconscious way, the idea now that not just would it be great and fun to have 6 Amazon Fire tablets, but maybe in the process we're teaching them that they deserve 6 Amazon Fire tablets, and that's a whole other problem, isn't it? That's a whole other problem we've created. So be careful with abundance. Be careful with it. Choose righteousness before it. Use it wisely. Don't be wasteful. Be cautious. Be honest about the process. Because too many folks have abandoned the good that they are and have been. Many folks have abandoned the righteous character that they spent so long to build to try to improve their economic circumstance. And they become like the quote on the very first slide, where they become almost confused by the fact that somebody would choose morals over money. But I would hope that every day we would choose morals over money. That we would always choose the righteousness of God. And in this time of year, when families are gathering and loved ones are coming and going and there's travel and there's wonderful opportunities to spend time with those you love and share in those things, just temper it with the righteousness of God first. And those things will be more enjoyable than you've ever had before. Because at the end of the day, it won't be about the pursuit of abundance, and it won't be about trying to outdo everybody around us and have what everybody, it'll just be about kindness and love and expressions of that towards those that we're close to. And maybe spend some time sharing that love with those that we're not close to. And maybe those who could stand to use our help. And not just this time of year, but at any time. And that's a lesson for another time. You may be subject to the gospel this evening. Can we help you in some way? Recognize the importance of being a child of God first and foremost. It's a dedication. It requires us to say, I want to live righteous, and I'm going to choose righteousness over other things. I'm going to choose the righteousness of God over the things of this world, and I want to honor that with my life. I choose Jesus tonight. I want remission of sins that comes through His shed blood. I want to experience the newness of life that He offers. Maybe you've done that. Something's in your life that's a public nature that we could pray for you concerning that tonight. If we could help you in any way, we'd invite you to come while we stand and while we sing.